Hello and welcome to B&E Now, a podcast about independent game development. I'm your host, Tobiah Marks, and with me today is Zachary Snader. Hey, Zachary.
Hello.
So tell me about Upgrade Acquired.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Zachary Snader, and I run a small-scale publisher called Upgrade Acquired. What that means is we basically help very small independent developers get their work out there. So recently, we helped on a project called Merchants, which was released for Android. Only about 22,000 downloads. So that's the kind of scale we're at. But we will also be working on a game called Hex Heroes, which is releasing for Wii U. And then the aforementioned game Merchant is being ported to PC and was recently greenlit. So that's the kind of games that we work on. The team sizes are all around five, if not less.
So why get involved in games in the first place? Why make games?
Man, what an open-ended question.
I always like to start with it.
So games are an incredibly amazing creative outlet. For me personally, I've been playing. I think the first game I can remember playing is Super Mario Kart on the SNES. I'm sure I played games before that, but ever since then, I've always been interested in just playing games and the arts. I did 3D animation for a bit. I actually worked on a game as a student that was pitched to Rockstar. Long story. And I think it's just an incredibly fun community to be a part of. First and foremost, I've gone to, this will be my sixth E3 this year. I won't be able to go to GDC this year, unfortunately, but it would have been my third. And the more I've gotten to know the people that are involved in the work that I do, the more that I've enjoyed, I guess the happier I've been to be a part of what is essentially like a really big family. Yeah, it's disjointed. It's a huge melting pot. But at the end of the day, everyone's gone through what you're going through to at least some degree. And if they haven't, they will. And a big part of why I enjoy this industry and why I like working on games is because I get to continue to share that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The game development community is such a great thing to be a part of. It's really, really accepting. I think a lot of the gamer hate that you get comes more from the player side, and that's not the hate on players, but I've never really met game developers who were not nice and interested in other people's projects and wanting to foster creativity.
It can be hard to understand other people's situations until you've been in them yourself. So I can understand animosity from players from time to time, and it's not like I haven't experienced that before. But yeah, developers seem to understand and have not necessarily better critiques, but more informed ones in regards to that kind of stuff.
So why publishing? Why not go out and make your own games?
Yeah, so I actually did some development a couple years back. I was a designer. It was really cool. I enjoyed the work, even though I was working for a contract studio, and the tasks were. Design is not always the most fun thing, especially when you have to make money doing it. It was way better than my other day job, but through that, I actually got into doing some outreach stuff. And I started to realize, one, our studio had a huge need to try to build a name for ourselves because the amount of competition out there is just staggering. I mean, to be an independent developer in this industry, it's really, really, really damn difficult. And that's why there are only so many games that reach the top of the crop. I mean, for every success story you hear, there's 100, if not 1,000, that are not successful. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that I understood why games were successful and why they weren't, at least from a standpoint of reaching out to people. So through publishing, which is, it's a loose term, because most publishers give developers money, and we're not necessarily there yet, but it's an easy classification. But through publishing, I've been able to understand the communications process, how to feel the community, have interactions with them, and use that feedback to better the product that I was working on. And without that communication, uh, it's like throwing darts to a wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, you can't just make the game. You have to actually get it out there and get it in front of people.
right.
Too many
And you know that
developers
better than
think that
anyone.
publishing or self-publishing means, oh, I don't have to act like a publisher at all. And it's like, well, no, you still have to do what a publisher does. You just get to control it, and that's better. You don't have someone telling you what to do. But if you try and solve publishing problems like how do I get people to find me through design, it's not necessarily going to work.
Right. The very few cases where that has worked, I mean, it's been luck more than anything. And even then, the developers were still like replying to people, reaching out to people. Uh, there's no magic formula for just, oh, hey, I'm going to put this out there and then the world is going to adopt it. Uh,
Hmm.
no, no. The special sauce is you actually putting the work in and creating that line of communication yourself.
So if I'm an indie developer, I don't necessarily know, what I need to do to market. You come to me, what are you offering specifically? Like, what will you do for my game?
So I'll actually do this anecdotally with Merchant. So the developer I'm working with, Bareface Games, they initially released the game just to kind of test it out. No communication, absolutely no like press or anything of that kind. They had zero downloads, and I mean zero with a Z, E, R, and O. And you could put a zero for the O because there was like literally no downloads when they released it. I mean, and it was on Android, so that kind of makes sense, right? But I came in and I said, all right, look, we need to do these things. We need to figure out a way to foster a community, especially because our goal at the time was to just get as much feedback on the game as possible. We had to have a method of communication to do that. So I made sure that we established a Facebook, a Twitter, and the biggest thing, Reddit. Facebook and Twitter, unless you're bigger, you're not going to get a ton of interaction. Usually, I've been on projects where Facebook was the most successful line of communication, but all in all, Reddit is like your go-to. Being able to have a successful Reddit community will do so much for your game and give you so many insights that you wouldn't have even thought of. So making sure that we had a good place to talk to our players was my primary objective. Secondary to that, I made sure that the developers, in addition to myself, maintain communication with the people that were reaching out to us, whether it was by email or on the Reddit or even the Facebook and Twitter. And as well, when people reviewed the game on Android, we've responded to hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And considering we have, let's see, we have 1,980 reviews as of today, and we've responded to a pretty good percentage of those. I know that's a lot, but you really have to because one, you show people that you care, and two, a customer is not just a number. Every player is their own person, just as you are to any other game. So when I play a game, let's say League of Legends, for example, because I'm pretty active in that community, I expect to be treated like I am a special member of that community because regardless of whether or not you have 200 people or 6 million people, every one of those players matters. And every one of those players can either bring the other people in or tell other people to stay away. So it's not treating people with respect for the sake of doing it. It's treating people with the sake of respect because they deserve it, because they are working with you, essentially.
Makes total sense. Yeah, definitely really great way to gain that kind of respect between players. I mean, even if they review you and I say, I hate this game, it's terrible, just you responding and going, hey, thank you so much for playing it. We appreciate the feedback. We'll try and do better. 99% of the time, they'll flip on a dime and go, oh, well, thank you so much for paying attention. I'll tell everybody about your game.
Yeah, I mean, even if you screwed up, like if you accept that, if you handle your responsibility, people will appreciate that you did that.
So what about like app store optimization? Because a lot of times I see developers and they say I got 0 downloads, and to me that doesn't say anything about their game, because if they don't know if their game is fun or not. Just no one is willing to try it, and that's their store presence. That's someone looking at their description, their screenshots, and going, "I don't want to try this."
Yeah. So we created special promotional screenshots specifically for the App Store, and that was kind of a pain in the butt because on Android, like the front end is not the most flexible thing in the world. I mean, it's nice, but it can get kind of messy. So we had to cater our screenshots to how the front end worked. We wrote our description specifically for the actual page, made sure it wasn't too heavy, used a lot of bullet points that people could consume what the game was like as rapidly as possible. And then as we started to create our community and as we started to get press, which I actually forgot to mention, I included that in the description. So basically trying to promote the game within itself without doing it on the actual game. And that actually went a long way. Like we got a ton of people to join our Reddit just by having them click the link that was in the description on the app page itself. As far as other optimizations, we didn't do a whole lot in the game, except our biggest thing is that we made it free with no in-app purchases. A lot of developers will not be able to do this, and this was the first game ever for this developer, so I don't necessarily recommend that route. However, people were incredibly receptive to the fact that it was like free, like actual free, because there are not a lot of games like that anymore. Instead of charging them, my developer wanted to see if we could do a donate button on a website or something like that. So that's the route that we took. And we found that people were actually more than willing to support us because they enjoyed the game so much and they appreciated that we weren't trying to do anything backhanded. Not to say that other development models are, just that we were really open about how we were, trying to give to players.
Did you do the donate button like in game through an in-app purchase that was just like a donate purchase?
So while that is a thing we wanted to do, unfortunately we didn't have the development resources to do it, so we did it on an external site.
The conversion ratio for that's got to be like very bad. Like to have all that friction.
It is terrible. Unfortunately. So again, if you're gonna go that way, definitely try to do it in-app. There's a ton of things that went wrong with the game, and we fully acknowledge those. And for next time, we know what's going to happen. And unfortunately, like that's not something we were able to implement. But we had enough support externally that it did kind of, I don't know, it was better than nothing.
So what was the long-term goals of the game? Like long-term donation model, probably not going to run, but are you thinking, okay, we get popular of this game and then we'll monetize the second game? We'll add expansion that's a straight in-app purchase. Like what's the long-term goal?
So developers and the people trying to run their communications, i.e. myself, sometimes don't agree on every aspect of the game. When you work with any company, that's bound to happen. Some kind of negotiation is going to fall apart, or you're just going to butt heads. So ideally, I wanted the game to be charged at 99 cents, just flat rate, because we really do have. I mean, we have tons of hours of content. A lot of people enjoy the game, and I felt that was a fair price point. So that's how I wanted to monetize the game. The developer wanted to keep it for free and literally only wanted to use it as a feedback platform to improve how they worked as developers. Given that it was their first game and the fact they got any downloads at all, that's understandable. But it's still, I mean, it's good if you actually make money.
Legit too. Like you can, be an indie developer and say, my, goal for this project is I want to learn about game development. I want to learn about community management. I want to get as many people as possible so I can know how to manage a community. Those are all legit goals. They're just not legit if you're like, and I also want to quit my day job and earn enough
Right.
money with this as a full-time business. And, game development as a hobby, there's kind of this like poo-poo thing looking at that, like, oh, well, if you're doing it as a hobby, you're not a serious developer. And as long as you're doing it full-time and making full-time income, then you're serious and successful. And if you're only making it a hobby, you're not, it's kind of, BS to think about, because it's okay to do it as a hobby. It's okay to have it as a side. It's okay to only put a few hours a week into a project and create something that you love. No one tells an artist that they shouldn't draw if they're not full-time drawing for a living.
Right. I totally encourage people that do game development as a hobby to keep exploring it as a hobby. But there is a clear line between creating games as a hobby and doing it as a business, which is why the developer and I kind of butted heads because, one, obviously I want to make money because this is my business. But at the same time, I understand where they're coming from. So it really is a fine line to walk. When people do it as a hobby, I think they just need to understand that if you don't want to take it as a business, then, keep doing what makes you happy. But the life of a game developer who does not work for a large studio, who's going from game to game, and relying on development itself as their income, it is a really hard life. And I've been there. And there are a lot of concessions that you need to make in order to develop games for a living. But the most important thing to me is that regardless of whether you're doing it for your income or because it's something you enjoy, you try to take as much from that experience as possible out of what you're doing. And despite us not really making a ton with this game, that's what we tried to do. So we were like, all right, look, we're not going to take money. We're not going to take money. Let's try to get as much as we can from what we're doing. Hence why we did all the community stuff. I mean, we have hundreds of posts on our subreddit. We've gotten hundreds of emails, tons of reviews. And to us, that is a huge victory. But it's definitely important to understand what your goal is when developing.
So that was your first project you got involved with, right?
So I was involved with Hex Heroes prior to this, but Hex Heroes is still ongoing.
Mm-hmm. So how many projects do you have going simultaneously?
Kind of closing out on Merchant for Android. So 2 right now. One being Hex Heroes, and I was on the Kickstarter for that. Kickstarter is a whole different beast. We could probably do an entire podcast on that,
absolutely.
Honestly.
There's a whole different aspect to this funding thing.
Yeah, and then Merchant for PC, which is a spiritual successor, more or less. And that was the... So it's a long history. That was the original idea. It was like 3 years ago. Wasn't my game. The original developer handed it to someone else, and then we created Merchant on Android, and now they're going back. They got greenlit on PC, so I'm going to be working on that as well.
So, you're
so
working
2 projects.
you're working with like 2 right now.
Yeah.
You're doing this full time as a business. What do you think your capacity is, right? Because it's you have to go to projects that are worth your time monetarily, since you're trying to do this full time, but you only have so many hours in the day that you can really foster a community. And ideally is that, well, I want to have a library of 10 games I'm running around simultaneously. It's like I like to stick with 1 or 2 at a time. What's your bandwidth?
Yeah. So the full-time thing, I actually got some investment last year from someone in the industry. And I've been doing Upgrade Acquired full-time for the better part of 10 or 11 months. And it's been really rough because I actually haven't made the money I've needed to sustain myself full-time. So I have to go out and get a job just to sustain my work in the games industry. So now I'm going to be splitting my time between a regular job and Upgrade Acquired. And I've worked 80-hour weeks before, but first off, let me tell you, it sucks, but it's also not unheard of. And it's something I'm probably going to be going back to.
Yeah, I mean, as a full-time person, the hours don't go down.
No,
full-time indie is still an 80-hour-a-week job.
Yes, it is.
If you want to be involved in the games industry, you're going to be working constantly.
Yeah, crunch is not a thing so much as crunch is the actual work cycle that you will be in.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
I don't want to scare off too people because people take crunch too far, and there's a lot of studies that show that a worker who works 6 days a week versus a worker who works 5 days a week, the 5 day a week is actually more productive, even though they get 8 hours less a week of work done, just because they have more time to relax. They're more productive in those hours that they're putting in.
Work smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly, exactly. But that argument aside, making sure you get the right amount of breaks and that you get the restful mindset, you're not just grinding yourself down. You're still going to be putting lots of hours into things. Give yourself a weekend, but when on your weekdays, whatever those are, you're going to be working a lot.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to discourage anyone. I mean, from my experience, I've definitely stretched myself too thin. And if you know that you're doing that, just take a break. That's honestly the best thing for yourself and the people you work with. And I know I should probably be taking my own advice because I'm going to be jumping into that lifestyle again. But going back into it, I at least know what my limits are and what to expect from myself. So when I hit those limits, I'm not going to push myself past them, even though my limits are pretty high up there. So my bandwidth, as you were asking, is pretty big. But I'm also going to work within my means. And I tried hiring someone last year and unfortunately it didn't work out, but I'm going to try to see if I can get people from the small community that I've developed to actually help me with my work to alleviate some of the pain. As a developer, that's not the easiest thing to do because then it's more things you have to manage. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you really, really have to learn how to lean on people and do it in a way that is not going to burden you. Let people help you out if they're willing to help you out, because it'll help you out more than you even realize.
So, what's your target audience for the games that you work with? Are they generally a classic hardcore gamer set? Like that itself is a broad term of what styles of games they might like. Do you try and get games that are of a similar audience to help you, cross promote?
I actually, right now, I'm not discriminating because I've been very fortunate to work with the projects that I am. So I've been in touch with other developers when I was like trying to reach out really rapidly, mostly PC, just because PC is one of the easier platforms to publish on. The Steam community is very vibrant, really flexible system. Excuse me. Console is a bit tougher to break into, from my experience. Uh, and not to rag on Nintendo, but Nintendo is incredibly difficult to work with, especially ever since Dan Adelman left. For anyone that doesn't know, Dan Adelman was like the indie guy. So they've kind of spread his job across multiple roles and people. And Xbox and PlayStation, it seems to be much easier to work with. I have friends that work with both of them and say it's a great experience. And then on mobile devices, it really is the Wild West still. I know that's the cliche, but it's totally true. You're still out there on your own, and you are your own support.
Yeah, it has
more or
the
less.
advantages of the Wild West where it's a completely level playing field, and the disadvantage is where you are on the same level as EA and all these other giant companies.
Yeah. And you say level playing field. I think we both know that's not always true, but for the most part,
Well, anyone who makes a game has just as much resources as EA does for putting out the game. Now, what EA has is the budget behind the game development. They have a team of experienced
right.
people, but if your game idea is great, you are not necessarily inherently disadvantaged purely by a money thing. Yeah, and money will get you advertising. Money will give you install campaigns, and money, of course, means a lot in budget. But lots and lots of games are successful without a budget. And in comparison to consoles, you kind of have to actually have a partnership agreement. So even if you have an amazing game, you can't just publish on Xbox and PlayStation right now, you have to go through some channels, and both Sony and Microsoft are trying to open those up and get more people in, but there's still a process there that's different than on mobile, where there is no gatekeeper. You just hit submit.
Right. Mobile is the only true form of quote unquote self-publishing.
Yeah,
When you
even
self-publish on
Steam, right? Like, you
consoles,
have to get out on Greenlight, and it's a whole
right?
process.
Yeah, I mean, when you self-publish on, I guess even for Greenlight, you have to get Greenlit, but for consoles, like you were saying, you still have to work with the companies directly. And luckily, they have good relationships with the developers that go through those programs. But it's not like there's a magic button and all the work's done for you and you have $1 million in your pocket. No, you still have to put in all of that hard work behind the scenes.
So what would you say is the worst moment of your company so far? Like, what terrible thing happened?
Let's see. Well, there's one that I can't really talk about.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. What give an example of something that you can talk about. Was there, a marketing campaign that was really unsuccessful?
I lost a client who was a friend of mine because they had bad blood with the person I was working with, who was also a friend of mine.
So interpersonal drama.
Yeah, relationships in this industry can go both ways, especially the longer you stick around. I try to avoid drama, but some people really like cops and mafia wives and all that, and tend to bring that kind of mentality into their own lives and don't really know how to work things out. And that game is going to do incredibly well. It will probably make a lot of money, and I am not currently a part of it. And I actually really am kind of bitter about it, to be completely honest. But you're gonna have missteps in this industry, and it's gonna be your fault. Sometimes it won't be your fault. That's how business goes. So
Sense.
you just gotta roll with the punches.
Fair enough. All right, so if I gave you the keys to a time machine, you can go back in time to when you started, and you had 30 seconds to tell yourself something. What would you say?
Go get a team and go get venture capital, and then build a better business plan, and you will have no issue getting your work done.
So you think that you should have focused on your own company's profitability and having money to invest in companies and put into marketing first rather than working for free?
Yep. I should have started developing the actual company more so than trying to develop the company alongside me getting work done. Because even now, like, the company is not developing at the rate that I wanted to. And the sole reason for that is because I'm actually working on games. So it's a double-edged sword. Because if I stop working, then, I'm not working on games. But at the same time, if I work on my business, I know that it would be so much more successful. And that's part of why I'm doing, I got accepted, well, Upgrade Acquired was accepted into an incubation program called Seed Spot in Phoenix. So that's me trying to rectify that entire situation. But this is about a year after starting the company. And that was a long year to not have a solid business development plan in place.
So tell me about the process. Like, how did you get accepted? I'm assuming you submitted to it first off.
Yeah. So I don't know how other incubator programs work necessarily, but SeedSpot is a tech incubation company, or a nonprofit, I should say, in Phoenix. And I had originally applied and was accepted into SeedSpot in 2013 with the game conference I ran, Future is Games. And I applied again, said, hey, I know it didn't work out last time, but I would like to propose to you what I'm doing now and see if you guys can help me kind of find how to get those right stepping stones in place so that I could turn this into what I want it to be. And they liked what we were doing. They liked the idea. They like that they could have some involvement in the games industry, even if it's just in passing. But they were really excited for that opportunity the same way I was excited to have mentorship on the business side. So it just luckily worked out for both of us.
Cool. And so you start that pretty soon.
Yeah, I start that on the 17th.
Excellent.
So I'll have to update you.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear how that process goes and how your business changes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for talking with us and telling us the story of development. But before we wrap up, I always like to talk about games we've been playing lately. I've been traveling a lot lately, so Hearthstone has been my go-to addiction feeder. It's one of those ones where like, oh, I need to sit down and there's games that I really need to get through, but they're going to take a couple hours. Oh, I can do, one round of Hearthstone, and it ends up just, dominating my playtime. But that said, whenever I have people over now, Fibbage has also been one of my main addictions. I've been usually playing the Xbox version of the new You Don't Know Jack series of games. And it is really cool because it lets you use your phone as a controller. And I think it supports up to 8 people. So it's just really fun to have people sit around the couch, gamers, non-gamers, and make up funny answers, lie. Someone picks the question, the whole room cheers. So it's definitely one of my favorite party video games as of now.
I would love to play that game because I saw a Giant Bomb quick look of it. But I've primarily I've been playing a lot of Merchant, which is the game we released on Android. And additionally, I've been playing way too much League of Legends. I was in recruitment at Riot last year, actually, for about 6 months, and I have not stopped playing that game. And it's funny because I never thought I'd be the person that was playing League all the time, but whenever I get a free minute, I'll usually hop into a game of League of Legends. So that's kind of my Hearthstone, I guess.
No,
even though
Hearthstone's the one that goes to me. I'm like, I think the Penny Arcade had a really great line of like, I'm weak to collectible card games. It's weak to my type.
Yeah.
It's just that's what my weakness is that whole addiction grinding mechanics. League never sparked my interest as much, but I imagine it's one of those games that if I just started playing it and I had friends who played it, just like all the other MMOs I've ever gotten to before that, I'll fall down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was never really into MMOs. Let's see, what else am I playing? I have a Vault Boy tattoo on my left arm.
Nice.
That's going to turn into a sleeve at some point. So I still hop into Fallout 3 in New Vegas from time to time. And then recently I also, my friend Murray Lancashire, who is an Australian developer, created this game called Kickball Champion of the World on iOS, and I've been playing that a little bit as well. So I try to mix it up between PC, console, and mobile.
Yeah, you got to try out everything.
Yeah. But when I'm traveling, I'll install a couple mobile games before I go out on a trip.
Awesome. All right, if you want to find more about the show, you can go to beindynow.com. We've got past episodes, show notes, all that cool stuff. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to my website, tobiahmarks.com, or follow me on Twitter, @tobiahmarks. Where can we get more about Upgrade Acquired?
Yeah, so for Upgrade Acquired, our Twitter is the best way to reach out to us. It's just @UpgradeAcquired. We also have a website that is still being devved up, but it's upgradeacquired.com. I'm on Twitter @Zachary Snader, Snader. And feel free to send me any information you want, any questions, comments. My email is Zach, ZACH, @upgradeacquired.com. And my communication line is always open. So don't hesitate to reach out to me on any communication channel, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for being on the show.
Tobiah, thank you very much for having me.
And for everyone else, go out and make some games.
Woo!